After a long week at work, all I wanted to do was relax with a good movie and a pizza. It was around 11 p.m. on Saturday night when I decided to order from Pizza Hut. I lived in a fairly quiet neighborhood, so I didn't expect any trouble. I placed my order online for a large stuffed crust pepperoni pizza with some garlic dipping sauce and got a confirmation that the pizza would be delivered in about 40 minutes. I settled on the couch, turning on my favorite show to pass the time. About 25 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting the delivery so soon, but I was pleasantly surprised. This should be nice and hot, I was thinking. When I opened the door, there stood a Pizza Hut delivery driver holding a pizza box. He looked a bit disheveled, but I figured it was just the end-of-shift weariness. He handed me the pizza, and I thanked him, tipping him generously. As I closed the door, I noticed he hesitated as if he wanted to say something, but then he turned and walked away. I carried the hot pizza to the kitchen and opened the box, ready to dig in. But as I reached for a slice, I noticed a small piece of paper tucked under the pizza. Confused, I pulled it out and read the hastily scribbled note. "Don't go back to the living room. Call the police." My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. What was going on? I quietly stepped away from the kitchen and peeked into the living room. Everything looked normal, but my instincts told me something was very wrong. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. The operator assured me that officers were on their way and told me to stay put. I locked the kitchen door and waited, my mind racing with possibilities. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, I heard the sound of police sirens approaching. I stayed hidden until I heard a firm knock on the door and a voice identifying themselves as the police. I cautiously opened the door and let them in, showing them the note. The officers searched the house thoroughly, and to my shock, they found a man hiding in the closet of my living room. He was armed with a knife and had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The police arrested him and took him away, leaving me shaken but incredibly grateful to the delivery driver. Later, I learned that the delivery driver had noticed the man lurking around the neighborhood and followed his gut feeling that something was off. When he saw the man sneaking into my house, he quickly wrote the note and slipped it under the pizza, hoping I would find it before it was too late. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the events over and over in my mind. The delivery driver's quick thinking had undoubtedly saved my life. I reached out to Pizza Hut the next day to thank him personally and ensure he got the recognition he deserved. Since then, I've been more cautious, always double-checking my surroundings and making sure my doors are locked. The memory of that night still haunts me, a stark reminder of how quickly a seemingly normal evening can turn into a nightmare. I had been working at Pizza Hut for a few months, mostly delivering pizzas around town. It was an easy job and the tips were decent, but one night, I had an experience that still gives me chills. It was a Friday night, and the orders were piling up. I was given a delivery to an address on the outskirts of town, a place I had never been to before. The address was handwritten on the order slip, which was unusual since we usually had everything printed. My manager shrugged it off, saying it was probably a new customer. As I drove out of town, the houses became sparse and the roads more desolate. Finally, I reached the address, an old, dilapidated house that looked abandoned. The porch light flickered, and there were no other signs of life. I double-checked the address. This was the place. I hesitated, but decided to go ahead. I knocked on the door, and after a moment, it creaked open slightly. A man peered out, just enough to see his eyes, which were cold and unsettling. He muttered, "Come in, the money is inside." Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I had a job to do. I stepped inside the dimly lit house, and the door slammed shut behind me. The man disappeared into a room down the hall, leaving me standing in the dark, musty hallway. Just a moment, his voice echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. As I waited, I noticed the walls were lined with old photographs. They depicted various people, all looking strangely familiar. My heart started to race as I recognized one of the faces. It was a guy who had gone missing from our town a year ago. Then another photo, a girl who had disappeared 2 months back. Panic surged through me. I needed to get out of there. I turned towards the door, but it was locked. Just then, the man reappeared, holding a large, old-fashioned camera. "Smile," he said with a sinister grin. I bolted towards the nearest window, desperately trying to pry it open. The man moved closer, his camera clicking as he took pictures. "You can't leave," he whispered almost gleefully. In a final burst of adrenaline, I grabbed a chair and smashed it against the window. The glass shattered, and I climbed out, cutting myself in the process. I didn't look back as I ran to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I sped back to the Pizza Hut, not stopping until I was safely inside. I told my manager everything, but when we called the police and they investigated, the house was empty. No man, no photos, nothing. It was as if it had all been a nightmare. But it wasn't. I know what I saw. To this day, I can still hear the click of that camera and see those cold, dead eyes staring back at me. I quit my job at Pizza Hut the next day and never looked back. The memory of that night still haunts me, a chilling reminder that some deliveries should never be made. It was a typical Friday night, and I had a late-night craving for some pizza. After a long week at work, nothing sounded better than a large pepperoni pizza from Pizza Hut. I placed my order online around 11 p.m., just before they were about to close. I lived on the outskirts of town, in a quiet area near Oakwood Lane. It was isolated and dark, but I enjoyed the peace and solitude. I got an email confirming my order and the estimated delivery time, about 30 minutes. I put on a movie to pass the time, but about 20 minutes later, there was a loud knock at the door. I paused the movie, surprised that the pizza had arrived so quickly. As I approached the door, something felt off. The knock had been aggressive, almost frantic. I peeked through the peephole and saw the Pizza Hut delivery car parked in my driveway, but the driver was nowhere in sight. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. There was no one there. I stepped outside, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" No response. I looked around and saw nothing but darkness. I turned to go back inside, thinking maybe the driver had gone back to the car for change or something. As I closed the door, there was another loud knock, this time from the back door. My heart pounded. How had the driver gotten to the back door so quickly? I walked through the house, feeling a growing sense of unease. When I reached the back door, I saw a figure standing just outside the glass, holding the pizza. I opened the door slowly. "Hey, you scared me," I said, trying to sound casual. The delivery guy looked disheveled and pale, his eyes darting around nervously. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaky. "I tried the front door, but—" "Yeah, I know, no worries," I replied, taking the pizza from him. "Here's your tip." He glanced at the money in my hand, but didn't take it. Instead, he looked over his shoulder, then back at me. "Can I come in for a minute?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My instincts screamed at me to say no, but something in his eyes made me pause. He looked genuinely terrified. Sure," I said, stepping aside. He hurried inside, closing the door behind him. "Thank you," he muttered, still looking around like he was expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "What's going on?" I asked, growing more concerned. "I don't know how to explain this," he began, his voice trembling. "I was driving to deliver your pizza when I saw someone following me. I thought it was just another car, but then they started flashing their lights and honking. I tried to lose them, but they kept following me all the way here." "Did you see who it was?" I asked, glancing nervously out the window. He shook his head. "No, but I have a bad feeling about this. When I knocked on your front door and you didn't answer, I thought maybe they had already gotten to you." We both fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the front of the house, followed by the sound of footsteps. "Oh my God," I whispered, backing away. "What do we do?" The delivery guy grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter. "We need to hide," he said urgently. We retreated to the basement, locking the door behind us. The footsteps grew louder, moving through the house. My heart raced as I tried to stay calm. The delivery guy and I crouched in the darkness, listening intently. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps stopped. There was a long silence, followed by the sound of the front door, opening and closing. We waited, hardly daring to breathe, until we were sure the intruder had left. When we finally emerged from the basement, the house was eerily quiet. The front door was wide open, but there was no sign of anyone. The delivery guy and I exchanged relieved glances. "I think they're gone," he said, his voice still shaky. I nodded, still trying to process what had just happened. "Thank you for staying with me," I said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." He gave a weak smile. "I'm just glad we're both okay. Maybe we should call the police." I agreed, and we made the call. The police arrived quickly and took our statements, but there was little they could do. The intruder was long gone, and there were no clues as to who they were or why they had targeted us. The delivery guy left after making sure I was safe, and I locked all the doors and windows, still shaken by the night's events. I couldn't help but wonder who had been following him, and what their intentions had been. One thing was for sure, I would never look at a late-night pizza delivery the same way again.